FPS Boost, a pretty fantastic initiative from Microsoft actually, using DirectX API tweaks on the Xbox Series consoles to double or even quadruple the frame rate of Xbox One and Xbox 360 games. PlayStation 5, well, we got a range of 60 FPS update patches on select titles, including some genuine classics, while out-of-the-box backcompat improved dynamic resolution scaling pixel counts and delivered performance boosts on titles with unlocked frame rates. However, many PlayStation 4 games, too many PlayStation 4 games I'd venture to suggest, remain locked at 30 FPS running under backcompat when they could be offering so much more. And only now, with frame rate unlock mods on exploited PlayStation 5 consoles, none of this will work on retail consoles, yeah, only with those mods are we beginning to see the rich potential on offer there. A 60 FPS rendition of Red Dead Redemption 2. So some ground rules: if your console is set to 1080p output on the front end, you'll get a native 1080p output, while a pretty basic and blurry checkerboard 2160p mode is also available, but only if you set the console output to 4K. This applies whether you're gaming on PS4 Pro or PS5, but in this three-way you can see both modes running on Pro stacked up against the checkerboard 4K mode operating on PlayStation 5. Now, you may recall some of the content of these clips as originating as test areas in our original Red Dead Redemption 2 coverage, and here they are revisited in a whole new way, frame rate limits removed, PS5 added to the mix. Kicking off with the barroom fight, you can see how the Pro at 4K can slightly dip beneath the 30 FPS threshold, while the 1080p mode struggles to do much beyond 30 to 40 FPS, 40 being a common limit. We're likely looking at a CPU limitation at that point. PS5 though, it's got all the horsepower it needs. It powers through at 60 frames per second locked. Basic traversal in the open world, well, here it seems that the CPU is somewhat less occupied as the 1080p performance level on the Pro is improved into the mid-40s now, but you can see how close to the knife edge PS4 Pro is in its 4K checkerboard mode. Meanwhile, PlayStation 5 takes that same mode, doubling the performance, or better. Again, a locked 60 frames per second in this test clip. Very similar situation kicks off here in this mission with lots of gunplay and AI agents in place. Clear water between Pro operating in checkerboard 4K mode where we're GPU limited, and at 1080p where we're almost certainly hitting the limits of the Pro's Jaguar CPU cluster. PS5, no problems whatsoever, and it's another 60 FPS lock. Finally, a look at Saint Denis, which is a pretty big town slash city, and where PS4 Pro is taxed to its limits on both 4K and 1080p modes. This is the first time where we see the unlocked performance of both operating around the 30 FPS cap. In short, one of the most demanding areas of the game for all parts of the Pro's architecture. And yeah, unlock the frame rate and PlayStation 5 runs the game at 60 frames per second. 60 FPS, locked, almost. As we continue through our circuit of the town, there are some dropped frames here, which I consider quite interesting as, you know, in theory, the PlayStation 5 should be wiping the floor with a checkerboard 2160p, just as it did in Horizon Zero Dawn and God of War 2018 in their respective 60 frames per second PS5 patches. It's a reminder that backcompat is backcompat, and we should likely expect better performance from a native app. Question is, where is the bottleneck? The frame drops are minimal, but they are there. Now, this does seem to be a GPU limitation, albeit a minor one. If we switch the PlayStation 5's video output to 1080p, the renderer defaults to Full HD instead, just as it does on PS4 Pro. And here you can see that the tiny variations off the 60 frames per second target found on the 4K checkerboard output are completely eliminated. So yeah, this would seem to rule out some kind of limitation or bottleneck on the CPU side of the equation. So, this has been a fascinating look at what happens when 30 FPS frame caps are removed from PS4 and PS4 Pro titles. And for me, it effectively hammers down why they are there in the first place. On Gen 8 hardware, there's no magical 60 FPS mode enabled just by turning off the frame rate cap. And the gains are generally so variable that you'd lose all sense of smooth or rather consistent gameplay. But at the same time, in many cases, PlayStation 5 just taps into its backcompat horsepower, and because the game's now running unlocked, it gets us to 60 frames per second with few problems. Not every game, but you know, the ones that count, they really are transformed. Now, if Illusion can deliver this, can Sony and its publishing partners? I guess I can discuss this for a little while as we look at more Red Dead 2 running at 60 FPS on PS5, right? Well, we've already seen a bunch of unlock patches at the beginning of the generation, but introducing Backcompat Plus, as we called it back in the day, wasn't always so straightforward and required games to be updated to the latest development environments. And that's not going to be viable for a great many earlier games. Conceivably, Sony could adopt an OS level solution that disables its system library for half-rate VSync, whitelisted to certain games, which may well be how some aspects of Microsoft's FPS boost worked back in the day. But ultimately, we're looking at considerable R&D from Sony and required buy-in from publishers to get the work done. The ball is in Sony's court, basically.